In the endless dark of space, where stars were only distant specks and silence ruled for ages, something drifted. It was not a rock, not a piece of metal from a broken ship, not even a frozen body of some forgotten traveler. It was small, no bigger than a man's fist, and it glowed faintly like ice catching starlight. It was an egg, smooth as crystal, cold as death, and yet alive. No planet claimed it, no sun warmed it, and still it floated on, waiting for the moment when the universe itself would allow it to break open. The egg had been there longer than memory. Maybe it was older than human history, maybe it had been carried across galaxies by forces unknown. Nobody knew. Nobody had ever seen it. And yet tonight, in a corner of the void where no one expected life, the egg began to crack. At first, the sound was soft, too soft for the vacuum of space, but something stirred inside. A sharp line spread across the shell. Another line followed, jagged, like frozen lightning. Pieces of crystal chipped away and drifted into the void. The egg shivered as if it could feel the emptiness pressing against it. Then, with one final crack, the shell split open, and from within, a creature slid out into the dark. It was so small that one might mistake it for a mouse. But it was no mouse. It had tiny wings folded against its sides, scales that shimmered faintly with a blue-white light, and eyes that opened slowly like a newborn star. They were the color of deep frost, colder than ice, and yet full of something ancient, something that did not belong to a creature so small. The baby dragon let out a silent cry, its mouth opening though no sound could carry through the void. Yet in that silence the universe seemed to notice. Somewhere sensors awoke, machines registered the strange birth, and life stirred where none should have been. The little dragon flapped its weak wings, but there was no air to lift it. It curled into itself, shivering though no wind touched it, as if the void itself was too empty for it to breathe. Its tiny claws reached out, catching fragments of its broken shell. The crystal pieces melted into frost at its touch, disappearing into its body as if the shell was never separate from the creature at all. A faint glow spread across its scales, stronger now, pulsing like a heartbeat. The egg was gone. The hatchling was here, and with its birth, something invisible rippled through the void, like a wave of energy that should not exist. It was not just the birth of an animal. It was the awakening of a force. Far away, a ship drifted at the edge of an asteroid field. Its engines dimmed as its crew scanned for resources. The ship was old, a human explorer vessel, patched together from years of travel. Inside, men and women worked quietly, unaware that destiny was about to find them. On the bridge, Captain Elias leaned over a screen, his tired eyes scanning for signs of life or minerals worth collecting. He had seen countless empty rocks, countless wastes of time. He wanted something, anything, that might prove this journey was worth it. Then suddenly alarms lit up the console. The sensor officer frowned, tapping the screen as if it was broken. "Captain," she whispered, "I'm reading something impossible." Elias straightened, his voice sharp. "Impossible in what way?" "It's a energy," she said. "Not from a star, not from a machine. It's alive, Captain. But it's not just alive. It's stronger than anything this size should be." The crew gathered, their faces pale in the glow of the screens. A tiny dot pulsed on the scanner, deep within the asteroids. Elias narrowed his eyes. "Show me the visual." The screen flickered, static cutting through, until finally the cameras locked onto the source. At first it looked like nothing more than a shimmer of light, a reflection of a distant star. But then the shape became clear. Small wings, tiny body, glowing scales. A creature floating in the void where no creature should survive. The bridge fell silent. No one spoke. No one even breathed. They were looking at something none of them had seen before. Something no one had written in the records of Earth or its colonies. A living dragon, the size of a mouse, glowing with frostlight. One of the younger crew members laughed nervously. That can't be real. It's a hallucination, a trick of the sensors." But Elias did not laugh. He had seen many strange things in space, but this was different. He could feel it, deep inside, the way a man feels the storm before the clouds arrive. He looked at the dragon on the screen, so small, so fragile, and yet radiating a power that made the ship's instruments spike with warnings. "Prepare a shuttle," he said quietly. "We're going to bring it aboard." The crew protested at once. "Captain, that's insane. We don't know what it is. We don't know if it's dangerous. Could be toxic. Could be hostile. It could be anything." But Elias raised his hand and silenced them. His voice was calm, steady, but with an edge of something they could not argue against. "It's a child," he said. "A hatchling. Look at it. It's helpless. And yet it's alive in the void. Whatever it is, it deserves a chance." The decision was made. The shuttle left the ship, cutting through the field of broken asteroids, engines humming low. The pilot guided it carefully, closing in on the tiny glowing creature. The dragon did not resist. It floated as if waiting, its eyes watching the human vessel approach. When the shuttle drew near, the hatchling spread its wings, and frost dust shimmered into the void like snowflakes. For a moment, the pilot thought it would vanish into nothing. But then the creature drifted closer, as if pulled by an invisible thread, until it landed gently against the shuttle's hull. Its claws clicked softly, its body glowing brighter as if sensing warmth for the first time. The crew watched in silence, some holding their breath, as the dragon clung to the shuttle like a newborn clinging to life. They brought it aboard. The hatchling was placed inside a containment room, not as a prisoner but for protection. The humans watched it through the glass, speaking in whispers. It was so small, curled into itself on the metal floor, eyes half closed, wings trembling. But the frost spread wherever it touched, thin lines of ice crawling across steel. And still its tiny chest rose and fell, steady, strong, alive. The crew felt both awe and fear, as if they were standing at the edge of something far greater than themselves. Elias stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the little dragon. He did not see a monster. He saw a story beginning. He saw a secret the universe had hidden, now revealed in his hands. And deep inside, he wondered, was saving it an act of kindness, or the first step into a storm no one could survive? The ship drifted on, carrying the newborn dragon into the unknown. Outside, the stars watched in silence, as if holding their breath. The hatchling stirred, lifting its tiny head. Its eyes glowed brighter, staring past the walls of the ship, past the asteroids, past the void itself. It saw something no human could see, something far away, ancient, waiting. The baby dragon closed its eyes again, as if tired from the journey, and fell into a deep sleep. But in that sleep, the frost around it spread further, stronger, colder. The crew shivered though the ship's heaters burned hot. They whispered among themselves, fear mixing with wonder. None of them knew what the creature was. None of them knew what it would become. But every one of them felt it in their bones. This was not just the birth of a dragon. This was the beginning of a story that would change the galaxy. The hatchling dragon rested in the containment room, curled into a ball of faintly glowing frost, its tiny chest rising and falling like the rhythm of a slow, eternal heartbeat. At first it seemed fragile, harmless, a small creature lost in a galaxy too vast to care. Yet every eye on the ship turned to that room, and no one could look away for long. The crew whispered in the halls, speaking in half-finished sentences, their voices heavy with both awe and fear. They had crossed countless light years, seen wonders of alien ruins and empty stars. But this was different. This was alive. This was new. And it was theirs, at least for now. Captain Elias stood outside the glass wall, his arms folded behind his back, his jaw tight with thought. He was a man of discipline, shaped by decades in the fleet, and yet even he could not deny the unease that clawed at the edge of his mind. The creature was only the size of a small animal, no larger than a cat now that it had stretched its wings, but the sensors continued to scream. The readings showed levels of energy far beyond what its size should allow. It was like holding a sun inside a box of glass, waiting for the box to crack. Elias stared, unblinking, as the dragon shifted in its sleep, exhaling a breath that misted across the steel floor. The frost spread wider. He wondered how long the walls would hold. Behind him, voices rose. The science officer, a thin woman named Rena, spoke quickly, her words sharp with fear. "Captain, this thing is dangerous. Look at the data. It's radiating energy in patterns we don't understand. This biology is impossible. It should not even be alive in the void, and yet here it is. For all we know, it could destabilize the ship, maybe even kill us all." Others murmured in agreement, their faces pale. But Elias did not answer her. He kept his eyes on the hatchling, watching it stir again. Its head lifted slightly, eyes half open. Blue light spilled into the room as it looked back at him through the glass, and for a heartbeat Elias felt as though those eyes were not the eyes of a child, but of something ancient, something that had waited longer than the stars themselves. Still, he spoke calmly, his voice carrying across the tense silence of the crew. "It is not an enemy. Look at it. It's a hatchling alone, abandoned in the void. If it meant us harm, we would not be standing here now. The moment we brought it aboard, it could have destroyed us. But it didn't." He turned, his sharp gaze cutting across his officers. "You all feel the same as I do, even if you don't admit it. This isn't just an animal. This is a chance. A chance for humanity to learn, to see something no one else has seen, to understand what the universe hides in its shadows. Do you really want to throw that away because you're afraid?" Some heads lowered. Some still shook in disagreement. But no one challenged him further, for Elias carried not just authority, but a certainty that anchored them all. He turned back to the dragon, who was now fully awake. Its small body rose on trembling legs, wings folding and unfolding as if testing the strength of its bones. Then, slowly, it stepped closer to the glass wall. Frost spread beneath its claws. The crew fell silent once more, all eyes locked on the movement. The dragon pressed its head lightly against the transparent surface, its glowing eyes fixed on Elias. For a long moment, man and creature stared at each other, and something unspoken passed between them. Elias did not flinch. The dragon blinked, lowered its head, and rested against the glass as though finding comfort in his presence. The silence was broken by the young engineer, Terran, who muttered under his breath, "It trusts you, Captain." The words spread through the room, a mix of relief and unease. Trust, yes, but trust from something they did not understand. Trust from something that might one day be large enough to break planets in half. Later, when most of the crew had left, Elias remained, standing guard by the glass. The lights dimmed across the ship, night cycle beginning, but still he did not leave. He thought of Earth, of the colonies, of the human struggle to survive among the stars. Every new discovery was a gamble, a risk, sometimes a curse. Yet he could not shake the feeling that this hatchling was not a curse at all, but a message, as though the universe itself had placed it in their path. He spoke softly, not sure if the dragon could hear, or if it could even understand. "You don't belong to the void anymore. You belong here, with us." The dragon stirred, lifting its head again, and for the briefest moment Elias swore he saw frost patterns spread across the glass in shapes that looked almost like symbols, as though the creature was answering him in a language no human could yet understand. Then it lay down once more, its glow dimming as sleep returned. Elias exhaled slowly, unaware he had been holding his breath. But not everyone was at peace. In the lower decks, whispers turned to arguments. Some crew members feared that Elias was blinded, that he was letting his emotions cloud his judgment. Others believed the captain was right, that this was humanity's chance to witness something greater than themselves. The tension grew, a storm inside the steel walls of the ship, even as outside the stars stretched on in their silent watch. The next morning, when the ship's cycle returned to day, the crew found the dragon had changed again. His body was larger, only slightly but noticeable. Its wings had grown, its scales brighter, the glow stronger. Rena studied it with wide eyes, her hands trembling as she held the scanner. "It's growing too fast," she whispered. "Faster than any living thing should. This is not natural. This is not safe." The others backed away from the glass, fear creeping into their veins. Only Elias stepped closer. The dragon looked at him again, and for a brief second, its mouth opened. Frost mist spilled across the glass, and a sound, faint and broken, reached their ears through the speaker system. Not a roar, not a cry, but something in between. It was trying to speak. The room froze in silence. Some gasped, some backed away further, but Elias leaned in. His heart beat hard against his chest, but his voice remained steady. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "We hear you." The dragon blinked, tilting its head as if listening. And in that moment, the fate of the ship, the crew, and perhaps even humanity itself was sealed. For deep inside that tiny hatchling, colder than frost and brighter than starlight, a storm was waiting. A storm that would not stay small forever. The days passed aboard the ship, and the hatchling dragon no longer looked as small and fragile as when it was first found. What had once been the size of a mouse had already grown into something closer to a small wolf, its wings stretching further each time it unfolded them, its scales brighter with every cycle. The crew watched in silence as the creature changed before their eyes. Its growth was not like normal life, slow and steady. It was like watching a storm build in minutes instead of years. Every day, every hour, the dragon became more than it had been before, and the ship's walls whispered with the sound of frost creeping where it rested. At first, some of the crew tried to treat it like a rare animal, something to be studied carefully. They took samples of the frost it left behind, scanned the shifting glow of its body, tried to measure the power that flowed through its veins. But the numbers broke their instruments, the readings climbing far beyond anything they could calculate. What was meant to be research turned quickly into fear. The engineers whispered that the dragon carried energy strong enough to tear the ship apart. The medics swore its biology defied every law they knew. And the soldiers on board began to wonder if the captain's kindness was going to lead them all to their deaths. Elias, however, never wavered. He watched the dragon closely, day after day, standing outside the glass when others were too afraid to be near it. The hatchling seemed to sense his presence. It would move toward him when he came, its icy breath fogging the glass, its glowing eyes locking with his. Some nights, when the ship's lights dimmed and the crew slept, Elias would stay behind, speaking quietly through the comm system into the room. His words were simple, steady, almost fatherly, as if speaking to a child who needed guidance. And though the dragon did not speak back, it would listen, tilting its head, curling against the frost-covered floor as though comforted by the sound of his voice. But comfort did not ease the fear that grew among the crew. One evening, during the meal cycle, a heated argument erupted in the mess hall. Rena slammed her hands against the table, her face pale but her eyes blazing with anger. "It's growing too fast. Don't you all see it? At this rate, in a month it'll be larger than this ship. And you think it'll still fit in that glass room? You think it won't break out? We're carrying a weapon, not a pet. And the captain, he's blinded by it." Others nodded, their voices low but filled with tension. Taryn, the young engineer, tried to argue, saying the dragon had done nothing to hurt them, that it seemed to bond only with Elias, but his words were drowned by louder voices. Fear spread like fire, and by the time Elias entered the room, silence fell in a wave of guilt and unease. He looked at them all, saw the doubt in their faces, and did not raise his voice. He only said, "Fear is natural, but fear is not reason. Remember that." Then he turned and left, leaving the crew to wrestle with their own thoughts. The next day, the dragon proved their fear was not without cause. During a routine systems check, a sudden surge of power swept through the ship. Lights flickered, alarms wailed, and for a terrifying moment, the engines nearly shut down. When they traced the source, it was not the reactors, not the control systems, it was the containment room. Inside, the hatchling had stretched its wings wide, frost spreading across the walls like cracks in glass. Its body glowed brighter than ever, its breath freezing the very air that hissed through the vents. The dragon roared, not in anger, but in something deeper, something primal. and the sound vibrated through every corner of the ship. The crew panicked, rushing to stabilize the systems, voices shouting over one another. But Elias entered the room, calm even in the chaos. He stepped to the glass, unflinching, and raised his voice so the dragon could hear. "Enough," he said firmly. "Calm yourself." The dragon turned its head, eyes blazing with frostfire, and for a moment it seemed as though it would shatter the walls and burst free. Then, slowly, it lowered its wings, the glow fading, the frost retreating. The alarms quieted. The power readings returned to normal. The ship exhaled, as if relieved to survive. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Now there was no denying it. The hatchling was growing too strong, too fast. If Elias's voice was the only thing keeping it under control, what would happen when even he could not stop it? Some began to whisper of sabotage, of locking the captain out and ejecting the creature into space before it destroyed them all. Others argued that killing it would be suicide, that whatever force had allowed it to survive in the void would not let it die so easily. The ship split in two, those who believed in the captain and those who feared the dragon. Meanwhile, the dragon itself seemed unaware of the division it caused. It continued to grow, stretching its body, testing its wings against the air currents of the containment chamber. When it breathed, ice spread across the vents, forming crystals that sparkled in the artificial light. When it slept, its glow dimmed, and frost crept along the floor like snow spreading in silence. But its eyes, those ancient, frost-blue eyes, always returned to Elias. Whenever he was near, the dragon watched him with a gaze too wise for something so young, as though it remembered something no one else could understand. One night, when the crew had all retired to their quarters, Elias stood alone by the glass, studying the creature as it dozed. His reflection mingled with the glow of its scales, and for the first time, he spoke words he had kept hidden. "I don't know what you are," he admitted quietly. "I don't know if you're salvation or destruction. But I know one thing: you were not born to die in silence. You were meant to be seen." The dragon stirred, its eyes opening slowly, locking onto him. Frost spread again, this time forming delicate patterns across the glass. Shapes almost like wings, almost like fire frozen in motion. Elias stared, realizing it was no accident. The creature was trying to answer him, to speak in its own way. His chest tightened with a mix of awe and fear, for he understood what this meant. The hatchling was not just growing in size. It was growing in mind. And somewhere deep in the ship, the crew tossed in uneasy sleep, unaware that their lives balanced on the fragile bond between their captain and the creature that would soon be far too large to contain. The galaxy outside remained silent, but in that silence, forces moved. Sensors on distant outposts picked up faint readings of impossible energy. Whispers traveled through the dark between stars, and rumors began to spread. Something new had been born, something dangerous, something powerful, and it was growing faster than anyone could imagine. The ship had been traveling in silence for days, tension filling its narrow halls like a storm cloud waiting to break. The crew no longer spoke openly about the dragon, but their fear was plain in the way they avoided the containment room, in the way their eyes followed Elias with doubt whenever he walked by. The hatchling itself had grown again, its body now the size of a large hound, its wings stretching wider than the chamber walls could comfortably hold. Frost coated the glass in shimmering layers, and the glow of its scales had grown stronger, casting pale blue light across the floor whenever it stirred. Elias still stood by it, still spoke to it, still believed in it, but even he felt the weight of unease pressing harder with every passing day. It was on the 6th day when the silence of their journey was shattered. Alarms screamed through the ship, sharp and sudden, throwing the crew into panic. Red lights pulsed across the halls as the comms officer's voice rang out in terror. Multiple signatures incoming. Unknown ships. No, hostile ships. Pirates. The word struck the crew like a knife. Pirates were ruthless in this part of space. Scavengers who stripped ships bare and left nothing but wreckage behind. And they never attacked unless they were certain of victory. Elias stormed onto the bridge, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Status," 6 ships, closing fast, the weapons officer replied, hands shaking as she worked the controls. They're armed, plasma cannons, torpedoes. We can't outrun them. Elias's jaw tightened. He had seen pirate raids before. He knew how they ended. Prepare defenses. Lock down all compartments. We hold them as long as we can. The crew scrambled into action, sealing doors, readying weapons, bracing themselves for the inevitable impact. But deep below the bridge, in its frost-covered chamber, the dragon stirred. It felt the vibrations of the alarms, the fear that pulsed through the ship like a heartbeat, and its eyes snapped open. Frost spread instantly across the floor, its breath misting the air as it rose. Something outside was coming. Something that threatened the voices it had grown used to hearing, the presence it had learned to trust. And though it had no words for it, the hatchling knew one truth. It would not let them be taken. The first pirate ship fired. A blast shook the vessel, rattling its hulls, sending crew members sprawling to the floor. Sparks showered from the ceiling as the shields faltered. Another shot followed, then another, each one tearing at the thin defenses of the human ship. The crew fought back, their cannons firing, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. Their ship was too old, too weak to withstand such an attack. On the bridge, Elias's voice remained steady even as the walls shuddered around him. "Hold the line," he ordered. "We will not break." But in the containment room, the dragon roared. The sound was different this time. Not the faint cry of a hatchling, but a deep, primal roar that shook the steel walls. Frost exploded outward, shattering the glass of its chamber, spilling into the corridors like a blizzard unleashed. The crew screamed as the cold raced through the halls, ice forming across the floor, the walls, even the air itself. And then, with wings unfurling wide, the dragon stepped free. It had grown again, faster than the crew could comprehend. Its body now filled the corridor, claws scraping the metal, scales blazing with frostfire light. Its eyes burned with fierce blue flame as it stalked toward the hull. Pirates boarded, forcing doors open, weapons raised, their laughter echoing as they stormed inside. But their laughter died in an instant, for standing before them was not a crew of frightened humans, but a dragon, its body cloaked in frost, its breath misting like smoke from the mouth of a storm. The first pirate raised his rifle, but he never fired. The dragon exhaled, and a wave of ice burst from its jaws, freezing him where he stood. His body turned to crystal, his scream locked forever inside the frost. Panic erupted as the others opened fire, but their plasma bolts fizzled and dimmed against the storm of cold that surrounded the beast. The dragon roared again, and the blizzard swept forward, encasing the pirates, the walls, even the air itself in glittering sheets of ice. On the bridge, the crew watched in shock as the ship's cameras filled with white. "Captain," Rena whispered, her voice trembling. "The creature, I know," Elias said, his eyes locked on the screens. His voice was steady, but inside his chest his heart thundered. He had always known the hatchling was powerful, but this was something else. It was not just surviving. It was destroying. Outside the ship, the pirates were caught by the storm as well. The dragon's roar carried through the hull, through the void itself, and its frost spread like a living force. Ice crawled across the enemy ships, their engines stalling, their cannons silenced as their hulls froze solid. One by one, they cracked, shattered, and broke apart into drifting wrecks, silent tombs glittering in the starlight. What should have been the death of Elias's ship became the death of its attackers, undone not by human strength but by the fury of the hatchling they had feared. When the silence returned, when the last pirate ship had fallen, the dragon stood in the ruined corridors of the vessel, its breath heavy, frost clinging to every surface. The crew stared from a distance, weapons half-raised but hands trembling. It had saved them. There was no denying it. But it had also nearly frozen them alive in the process. The walls groaned with the weight of ice, the air still biting cold. If it had unleashed just a little more, none of them would have survived. Elias walked forward, unarmed, his boots crunching against frozen steel. He stopped before the dragon, looking up into its blazing eyes. The creature lowered its head, frost dripping from its jaws, and for a moment, man and beast stood face to face. Elias raised his hand, not touching, but steady in the air between them. His voice was calm, firm, unshaken. "You saved us," he said, "but you must learn control. You are not alone anymore." The dragon's eyes narrowed, then blinked slowly. Its breath softened, the frost retreating, the glow dimming. It lowered itself to the ground, curling once more, its wings folding tightly against its body. And for the first time since its awakening, the ship felt still again. But the crew did not relax. They watched with fear, whispering in shaken voices. They had seen its power. They had seen entire ships destroyed in seconds, pirates turned to ice before their eyes. It had saved them, yes, but it had also shown them what it could do if it ever turned against them. And though Elias stood steady, though the dragon bowed to his voice, one thought spread through every mind aboard that ship. They were alive, but for how long? And somewhere in the dark between stars, word of the storm was already spreading. Other eyes had seen the frost. Other ears had heard the roar. The galaxy was beginning to tremble. The ship drifted in silence after the battle, its hull still coated with frost, its corridors scarred by the storm that had swept through. The bodies of pirates remained frozen in glittering statues, sealed in ice that no torch could melt. The crew moved carefully through the wreckage, speaking little, their breaths fogging in the air that remained unnaturally cold. They owed their lives to the hatchling, but gratitude was drowned by fear. They had seen what it could do, and none of them could forget the sight of entire ships turned to frozen husks in the void. Elias walked the halls with his usual calm, but inside, he carried the weight of every whispered doubt. He heard the crew at night when they thought he wasn't listening. Some wanted to abandon the dragon on the next planet they found. Others wanted to destroy it before it grew too large to control. Yet none dared act, not while Elias stood in its defense, and not while the dragon's eyes glowed with the quiet watch of a storm waiting to wake again. In its chamber, which had long since lost its walls of glass, the dragon lay coiled, larger now than any wolf, its scales bright with pale light. Its breath misted in the air, sending frost crawling across the floors. Sometimes it slept, and the silence felt almost peaceful. Other times it stirred, stretching its wings so wide the steel bulkheads creaked. And each time it looked at Elias, those cold blue eyes softened, almost curious, almost gentle. To him it was not a monster, not a weapon, but something more. A child of frost, still learning, still searching. But to the crew it was something else entirely. Far beyond the human vessel, the galaxy was already stirring. The destruction of 6 pirate ships had not gone unnoticed. Distress calls had been sent before the storm silenced them, their signals carried across the stars. Outposts detected impossible spikes of energy, cold bursts that made instruments fail. And whispers began. In the markets of alien worlds, smugglers spoke of a weapon hidden aboard a human vessel. In the chambers of empires, rulers listened to reports of a frost storm that could tear fleets apart. Some laughed at the rumors, calling them impossible. But others did not laugh. They remembered old legends, stories of creatures born from the void, dragons that shaped worlds and burned civilizations from memory. And they wondered if one had been born again. Back on the ship, the crew gathered in secret. In the dim light of the mess hall, their voices were sharp with fear. Rena spoke first, her hands trembling as she clenched the table. "You saw what it did. Entire ships, destroyed in seconds. We were seconds away from freezing ourselves. This isn't protection, it's a death sentence. The captain's blinded, but we are not. If we don't act, we'll all die." Others nodded, their faces pale. One of the soldiers leaned forward, whispering harshly, "We can't control it. No one can. It only listens to him, and what happens when it stops? What happens when it decides it doesn't need him anymore?" Terran, the engineer, raised his voice, though his fear was clear. "It saved us. You'd all be dead if not for it. Maybe it's dangerous, yes, but so is every weapon we've ever built. Maybe this isn't an enemy. Maybe it's a chance. His words were met with glares and mutters, but no one could deny the truth. They were alive because of the dragon. Alive because of a storm that did not yet see them as prey. The argument ended in silence, the crew leaving one by one, their doubt heavier than before. Elias knew of their meetings. He said nothing. He only returned to the dragon, watching it sleep, speaking quietly when it stirred. "They fear you," he admitted softly, his voice calm, steady. "And maybe they should. But I don't. Not yet. You're not done growing. You're not done becoming who you are meant to be. And when that time comes, I hope you remember us." The dragon's eyes opened, glowing like frozen stars. It blinked slowly, lowering its head near Elias, and for a moment the frost across the floor melted slightly, as if in response. Elias allowed himself a small breath of relief. The bond was still there. The storm still listened. But beyond their walls, ships had already begun to move. A nearby alien empire, the Ketheri, dispatched scouts to confirm the rumors. They had fought dragons in their myths, sworn that none would rise again. When their scouts found frozen wrecks drifting in silence, they sent fleets. The humans did not yet know it, but the galaxy had turned its eyes toward them, and the storm aboard their ship was no longer a secret. 2 days later, the first encounter came. The sensors screamed again, though this time not with pirates. Sleek alien vessels appeared on the edges of their scans, holding distance, watching. The crew gathered on the bridge, fear sharp in their voices. "They're tracking us," the comms officer whispered. "They're waiting." Elias's jaw tightened. He knew what it meant. "They know," he said quietly. "The galaxy knows." The dragon stirred once more, its scales glowing brighter, as if it too sensed the eyes upon it. The frost crept further along the walls, and the crew shivered. The storm was no longer theirs alone. It was becoming something greater, something that would shake not just their ship, but every world that dared to look its way. And as the alien fleets shadowed them from afar, and as whispers spread through empires and colonies, one truth settled over them all. The galaxy shivered not because of what the dragon had done, but because of what it might do. The hatchling was still only a child, but children grow, and this one was growing faster than the stars themselves. The galaxy waited in silence, but silence never lasted long. Word of the frostborn hatchling had spread like wildfire across the stars. Every empire, every pirate clan, every wandering fleet had heard the whispers of a human ship carrying a creature not seen in 1,000 years, a dragon born in the void, growing faster than time itself. Some wanted it destroyed before it could rise to power. Others wanted it captured, bound, made into a weapon. None wanted to ignore it, and so they came, ships of steel and light, shadowing from a distance, closing in with each day that passed. Aboard the human vessel, fear and tension reached its breaking point. The dragon had grown so vast that the ship could no longer contain it. Its wings brushed against steel, bending walls as if they were paper. Its body coiled through multiple decks, frost spreading wherever it touched. The crew walked carefully, their breaths clouds in the freezing air, their voices hushed as though the dragon could hear even their thoughts. They no longer spoke of ejecting it. That chance was gone. They no longer argued of abandoning it. There was nowhere left to go. All they could do was survive in its shadow and pray it did not turn on them. Elias alone stood unshaken. He walked the frozen halls with steady steps, his breath white, his eyes fixed on the great creature that had once been no larger than a mouse. He remembered the egg in the void, the tiny spark of life he had cradled in his hands. He remembered the hatchling's first cry, soft and uncertain, its eyes searching for something familiar. And now he stood before a being so vast it filled the ship, its scales glowing with pale fire, its breath colder than death. Yet those same eyes still looked at him with recognition. Still, after everything, it listened to his voice. But recognition was no longer enough. The galaxy had arrived. The first fleet came without warning, Ketheri warships sliding out of the dark like wolves around prey. Their weapons charged, their comms alive with warnings. "Humans," they said, "you carry a danger beyond reason. Release it or be destroyed with it." On the bridge, the crew panicked. The screens showed entire armadas forming a wall of fire. The ship had no chance. Not against this. Not against fleets built to crush entire colonies. Voices rose in fear, but Elias remained still. He looked at the dragon. Its body curled through the ship, its wings twitching, its frost creeping higher with every second. He knew what it wanted. He knew what it needed. Slowly, he spoke. "You were never meant to stay here. Not in this shell, not in this cage. You are more than a weapon. More than a storm. It's time." The dragon's eyes flared with light, brighter than ever before. So bright the crew shielded their faces. Frost cracked and split across the hull, spreading faster than fire through dry grass. Metal shrieked as the creature unfolded its wings, no longer caring for the walls around it. With a sound like thunder, the ship tore apart, fragments of steel scattering into the void as the dragon rose, free at last, its body stretching larger than the vessel itself, then larger still. The crew clung to escape pods, alarms wailing, their shouts lost in the roar of the storm. But Elias did not run. He stood on the fractured deck, watching as the creature he had raised filled the void, its scales glowing white-blue, its wings casting shadows across entire fleets. The hatchling was gone. What remained was something vast, ancient, and terrifying. A dragon of frostfire, stretching across the stars. The Ketheri fired first. Streams of light tore through the void, weapons designed to shatter planets. They struck the dragon's body, and ice spread outward, turning their beams into frozen shards that drifted harmlessly away. The dragon opened its mouth, and a roar thundered through space itself, a sound felt more than heard. Frostfire poured from its jaws, a storm that swept across the fleet. Warships froze solid in an instant, entire armadas silenced as their hulls shattered like glass. The galaxy's hunters became statues, drifting monuments to the storm's awakening. But the dragon did not stop. It stretched its wings wide, and from them spread a storm so vast it dimmed the stars themselves. Frost spread across space like a living sea, waves of ice rolling outward, swallowing ships, swallowing silence, swallowing fear. The crew in their pods watched in awe and terror, realizing they were witnessing something no human had ever seen before, something no human should have been able to survive. And through it all, Elias stood, his body shaking from the cold, but his eyes steady. He knew now what the creature was. Not a child of accident, not a beast of chance. It was destiny given form. It was the storm the galaxy had forgotten, reborn in silence, carried in a fragile egg through the void until it found hands willing to protect it. He had been nothing more than a guide, a voice to keep it steady until it remembered its true self. And now it was awake. The storm slowed, the frostfire dimmed, and the dragon turned its gaze upon Elias. Those eyes, brighter than any star, locked with his. For a moment there was silence. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, the dragon lowered its massive head, pressing its icy snout gently against the fractured deck where Elias stood. It was not a gesture of hunger, nor of dominance. It was recognition, farewell, gratitude. Elias reached out with a trembling hand and touched the frost-covered scales. His voice was quiet, almost broken, but steady. Go. Become what you are meant to be. The dragon's wings unfurled once more, and with a single beat, it rose into the void. Frost trailed in its wake, a river of ice flowing through the stars. It grew as it flew, larger and larger, until it dwarfed planets, until it stretched across entire systems, until it became something no fleet, no empire, no galaxy could contain. The hatchling that had once fit in a human's hand now outgrew the very stars, becoming a blizzard across the cosmos. A living storm of frostfire destined to shape all who came after. The pods drifted in silence, the crew watching as their captain stood alone, his figure small against the endless void. And though fear still clung to them, though awe still froze their hearts, one truth became clear. Humanity had been changed forever. They had raised a storm, and in return, the storm had spared them. The galaxy would never forget this day. Empires would tremble, fleets would fall, and legends would be reborn. But somewhere, in the quiet of space, a human captain stood with frost in his breath and a memory in his heart, knowing he had seen the impossible and lived. The dragon was gone, but its destiny had only begun. And so the galaxy shivered, waiting to see what the Frostfire would do next.